To those of you that, like myself, grew up in the United States of America, do you remember being told that, once upon a time, Benjamin Franklin wanted to make the turkey the country's national symbol, and have it be put on the Great Seal instead of the bald eagle? I did, at least. Either way, that, for the most part, is just wrong. Franklin's involvement with the United States seal is actually kinda weird, as were a lot of the developments about how my country created the design that I know today. For those of you that just might not know what a Great Seal even is, it's basically just the emblem or symbol that a country uses to authenticate or represent itself. Oftentimes, but not always, it will have an obverse and reverse side. Although the United States primarily uses the obverse, it has both. I don't know if anyone needed to hear that, but I don't want to be presumptuous. We're going to be looking through a lot of designs during this video, so I don't want anyone to be confused. Of those proposed ideas, though, I want to play around with them as I explain them, so seeing as this is a YouTube video in the year 2026, I will of course be ranking them on a standard tier list, omitting E tier of course. As we all know, E tier is F tier. The format I made should be the first link in the description, or follow along as the video goes on. What exactly are my criteria for why I'll rank stuff where? I don't know. I don't plan on making it consistent at all. Vague notions of if the design has any real meaning to the ideals of the country. Is it aesthetically pleasing, or does it have aura, to use modern parlance? It should also be noted that since many of the designs I'll be showing come from sketches or later illustrations, I'm ranking this more so on what I perceive the author's vision to have been, rather than the artwork itself. I say this in anticipation of the fact that there will be instances where I rank rude sketches higher than professionally made depictions. Before I get to that, though, I must acknowledge the individuals that helped make this video possible. Most notably are two sources I use that very much ought to be mentioned. Foremost of them all is R.S. Patterson and Richard Dougal's 1976 book, The Eagle and the Shield, which is just so phenomenal and thorough, and how deeply it goes into the development of the United States Great Seal, and positioned below that is the website greatseal.com, which summarizes a lot of the material there in a more digestible format, along with some supplementary visualizations and information from its creator, John MacArthur. No, not the preacher. Shout out to this YouTube video in particular as well. It's what prompted me to take this video in the direction that I did. Aside from those three, there are other resources you can find in a document linked in the description, and collectively a lot of them are just pulling the material found in the journals of the Continental Congress, the papers or files of the Continental Congress, or personal letters authored by or sent to the Founding Fathers and their associates. Nearly everything in this video is extrapolated from those late 1700s primary sources, either directly or indirectly. Many of them are available online, but others I've only found to be preserved in the scholarship of Patterson, Dougal, and MacArthur, and individuals like them. I've done my best to record all of that in my own source document, and the numbers you will occasionally see in the corner of the screen throughout this video will correspond to the relevant citations provided in there. With that said, I believe the best place to begin this story and my subjective rankings that will be given alongside it is the exact day that my country was formally founded. On the 4th of July, 1776, after, the Declaration of Independence was signed, the Continental Congress, towards the end of that day's session, resolved, in their words, that, quote, that Dr. Benjamin Franklin, Mr. John Adams, and Mr. Thomas Jefferson be a committee to bring in a device for the seal of the United States of America, end quote. Despite this feeling like a bit of an all-star lineup in terms of any prominent contemporary American figures, you're probably gonna feel a little bit disappointed in what they suggested. Except for Franklin, he kinda cooked in my opinion. Over the next month and a half or so, this is what they would come up with. Beginning with Dr. Franklin, his idea, an altered illustration of which was attempted by B.J. Lossing in 1856, can be found preserved in a note penned by the man himself. The absolutely unreadable handwriting is usually transcribed as follows. Quote, Moses standing on the shore and extending his hand over the sea, thereby causing the same to overwhelm the Pharaoh, who was sitting in an open chariot, a crown on his head and a sword in his hand, raised from a pillar of fire in the clouds, reaching to Moses to express that he acts by command of the deity. Motto, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. End quote. Yeah, this is what Franklin actually proposed instead of the turkey. I bet you didn't see that coming. Not that the story of Franklin and his turkey doesn't have some historical origin. It's just that it's not really relevant to our primary discussion right now, and thus I've elected to save that until later in the video. I want to focus on the committee's proposal here first, which, regarding Franklin, Adams, and Jefferson, largely drew on the myths, legends, and stories of ancient history. Franklin's inspiration here is of course the famous account of Moses and the Israelites by the hand of God fleeing from and judging the ancient kingdom of Egypt through the Red Sea, which today is standardly demarcated as the 14th chapter within the book of Exodus. What do I think of this? Although I have some reservations, I must admit that everything goes incredibly hard. One of the most iconic scenes from the biblical narrative, and a similarly striking slogan, considering that they had basically just declared war against one of the world's most powerful empires. Most people's hesitations about this, I imagine, will have something to do with the use of religious art in the nation's iconography. Mine instead are actually, more theological than political. It'd take a while to explain, so I guess just ask in the comments if you're curious. That being said, I'm gonna let Franklin's design here just barely sneak into A tier. B tier might be a more safe and honest pick, but you know what? It's just cool, so I'm not going to think about it too hard. Moving on to John Adams, his personal idea can only be found in a letter he sent to his wife on August 14th, 1776. I won't even bother reading out the transcription to you, as it literally just describes this specific piece of artwork by Simon Grebelin called The Judgment of Hercules, in which Hercules, before his story had really begun, is visited by two women, one representing a path of virtue and hardship, and the other representing a path of vice and pleasure. That's literally it. Adams just really liked this picture, I guess. I contemplated putting this into F tier, and to be honest, I don't imagine that Adams would contest that either. He himself immediately admits it is both too complicated for a seal, and also, not something that he came up with. But I think there is some wisdom in the idea that America would also be a young nation, which would eventually have to choose between a difficult morality or a convenient immorality. Because of that, I guess I'll let it sneak into D tier. Jefferson's initial conception can also only be found in the same letter that Adams sent to his wife. The unreadable ink markings have been deciphered as follows. Quote, Mr. Jefferson proposed the children of Israel in the wilderness, led by a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, and on the other side Hengist and Horsa, the Saxon chiefs, from whom we claim the honor of being descended and whose political principles and form of government we have assumed. End quote. To those of you that would have felt some sort of way if the United States of America had Moses as a national symbol, I imagine you would be about to combust at a certain point if the Jewish tribes were featured there instead. I am really glad we got spared from that timeline. No matter how you feel about it though, Jefferson's idea for the obverse, which could be drawn from imagery shown in multiple parts of the Pentateuch, but most likely at the end of what we normally consider the 13th chapter, is going in a pretty immediate F tier for me. I don't even have any theological comments I care to make. As controversial as this would probably be today, it's just boring, and his other design is going in F tier too. I'll be honest, I had never even heard of Hengist and Horsa before this video, and I still don't care about them. They're basically just two 5th century AD historical-mythical Germanic brothers who played a founding and seminal role in the early history of Great Britain. That's it. I don't think any of you care. F tier. After the three of them had made their attempts, they, like any smart committee of people chosen basically just on name value rather than credentials, went and outsourced their work to someone that was actually qualified. On August 13th, John Adams, and maybe also the other two, met with a man by the name of Pierre-Eugène du Simitiere, an early American collector and artist who would serve as the committee's design consultant. This meeting is also recorded in what Adams sent to his wife on August 14th. A handwritten note from du Simitiere has been preserved. I'm not going to read it out all to you, it's kinda long. More interestingly, however, du Simitiere's original sketch has also been preserved. The more refined 1856 realization is a little inaccurate compared to his original design, but I think it mostly communicates the important stuff. It is a shield, segmented into 6 parts, each with its own symbol representing the ethnic groups that they considered the most prominent. It is supported on one side by the Roman goddess Libertas, and on the other side supported by an American Revolutionary soldier. Above the emblem is the Eye of Providence, and the motto below them reads the 13-letter Latin phrase E pluribus unum, in English meaning, out of many, 1. Although he doesn't include it in his sketch, he also suggests the design be encircled by a border displaying the name of their new nation. This, despite my lack of qualifications compared to him, just feels very mid. It's just so uncompelling in my opinion. Sure, it can be made to look clean and proper, but it doesn't mean anything to me. It feels more like a vestige of their European heritage, rather than anything that is uniquely and independently American in its identity. For all of those reasons, I sentence this design to be forgotten in C tier. Over the next few days after their meeting on August 13th, 1776, the Committee of Franklin, Adams, and Jefferson, probably including their advisor du Simitiere as well, drafted up the report for the Continental Congress. We don't technically know who wrote it, but it is generally believed that it was authored by Jefferson. The report was submitted on August 20th, 1776, with the author's final decision being to make du Simitiere's proposal the obverse, with the one meaningful change being the replacement of the American soldier with the Roman goddess Justitia, and for the reverse side he chose Franklin's design, both designs being slightly reworded. Seeing as Franklin's design is basically the same, I have nothing to add there, so still A tier. But as for the slight alteration on the obverse, although small, it is significant enough of a change for me to want to rank it separately. That being said, it's still essentially the same, and thus my critiques of it are still the same. I've said same a lot of times here, but regardless, it too will be going in C tier. Although if I had to choose, I do prefer the redrafted version, I guess. The Continental Congress didn't seem particularly impressed by either, as in their words it was ordered to lie on the table. If you're trying to get something done, that is never a good thing to hear in a courtroom, and thus, the first Great Seal Committee came to an end. To point out some stuff that you may not have picked up on, although I expect the designs I showed you were overall unfamiliar, there were some elements first included here that got preserved in the version of the Great Seal that the United States still uses today. The phrase E pluribus unum, the inclusion of the founding date, and the Eye of Providence. There was also the choice to submit an obverse and reverse design, which could very easily just have not happened. That, in my opinion, is their most important contribution. It's subtle because we kind of assume that to be the starting point today, but it was a big decision, and like I said, it could have not happened. Moving on from there, though, in January of 1777, the issue of the need for a Great Seal came up again, and then was immediately ordered to lie on the table again, to which it remained basically unaddressed for over 3 years. In fairness, they were a little busy, but regardless of that, on March 25th, 1780, this would be ordered by the Continental Congress. Quote, ordered that the report of the Committee on the device of a Great Seal for the United States in Congress assembled be referred to a committee of 3, the members chosen, Mr. James Lovell, Mr. John Mohr Scott, and Mr. William Churchill Houston. End quote. I do not expect you to know who any of those 3 men are. I didn't before the video. I'll probably forget about them at some point after, and to be honest, they really just aren't that important in much of the coming discussion. Unlike the prior trio of famed founding fathers, this less famous trio of early American figures kind of just defaulted to mostly outsourcing their work to someone else. In this case, it was Francis Hopkinson, who, although is considered a founding father, most of you who have heard of him will just know him as a leading figure in the design of the US flag. I haven't been able to determine at what point Hopkinson was contacted, but on May 10th, 1780, the Second Committee submitted this design of his to the Continental Congress, which was read aloud during the session on the following day. There is a transcription of their proposal right here, but I'm going to elect to just summarize the image. At least in regards to format, he seems to be drawing very much from du Simitiere, but the specifics are nearly all different, and sometimes even contradictory depending on if you're drawing from either the written or visual proposal. The shield is now obviously drawing from the freshly invented American flag, while the 2 figures supporting it have become a warrior wielding a sword or a Native American with a bow and arrows. And on the other side is a woman holding an olive branch. Above them is a shining constellation of 13 stars, and below them is the Latin motto Deo vel Pace, which means something akin to in war or peace. This too I will sentence to C tier, for a lot of the same reasons I didn't like du Simitiere's proposal. It's too cluttered, it doesn't really feel that American, maybe a bit more than the other one, but still it just really isn't that interesting. On the obverse, the Roman goddess Libertas is seated in a chair, holding her signature spear with a radiant pileus, or freedman's cap, on the tip, with a dagger in her offhand. The year inscribed below now reads 1780, although I think that was accidental. The Latin text above, aut aut nullis, means something along the lines of either this or nothing. His written account also specifies that the Latin word semper, meaning always, should be shown below, but he fails to include that in his drawing. As basic as this is, I'll be honest, I kinda like it. So many of the seals were either overcrowded and or overcomplicated that this simplicity just really appeals to me at this point. The vision I see him aiming for has an elegance to it that I really appreciate. I don't know if it ever would have had the capacity to be a truly iconic seal, but it works, and I feel comfortable putting it in B tier. It seems unclear as to what exactly the Continental Congress thought of the design. At the very least, it doesn't seem like they accepted it enthusiastically, but regardless of any case, the second committee would submit a revised design about a week later, on May 17th, 1780. It is almost entirely the same. Regarding the obverse, the warrior being on the side of the shield seems to have become their official pick. The pattern on said shield is slightly altered. I see no reason not to plop it alongside its slightly older sister in this ranking, so also C tier. For the reverse, the design is also basically the same, but the woman's dagger is now missing and the Latin phrase virtue perennis, which basically just means everlasting virtue, is added. That's kind of it. I'm not sure which rendition of the design scheme I prefer, but just like the obverse, I see no reason not to put it right next to its slightly older sister, so B tier. W.C. Houston, the most involved original member of the second committee, did actually propose a design, but has been very forgotten by history, more than just about anything in this video, to the point where nobody has attempted an illustration of it. Therefore, I have attempted my own. I'm not ranking my drawing when I say this, I'm ranking the vision that I perceive Houston to have been going for. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Thematically and stylistically, it has a lot of similarities to Hopkinson's reverse design, and it is indeed very possible that Hopkinson's said design was in some way inspired by Houston's short description right here. In the end, though, it doesn't seem like the Continental Congress was particularly impressed by the proposals of the Second Committee, as after their presentation on May 17, 1780, they would order it to be recommitted. Before Hopkinson could make any further progress on his design, however, he and the Continental Congress got into a really petty and dumb spat, so whatever could have been got doomed to kind of just fizzle out. Despite the disappointing end to this committee, it too had contributions that made it on the seal the US uses to this day. A shield modeled after the American flag, the contrast of the olive branch and the arrows, and a radiant constellation of 13 stars amidst the breaking clouds on top of the design, which is probably the most forgotten element of our current iteration. Skipping ahead over a year once again, on January 28, 1782, the Continental Congress would appoint their secretary, Charles Thomson, to deal with matters regarding the Great Seal. Things would further stagnate until May 4th, when another committee of 3 was assembled, consisting of Arthur Middleton, Elias Boudinot, and John Rutledge. A Dr. Arthur Lee would largely assume the position of Rutledge in the preceding decisions. This third committee would, within days, seek out the help of a more qualified individual, who in this case would be a man by the name of William Barton. He, acting as their consultant, would come up with a design equally fast. Despite it having no reverse, it has a rather long description, so I won't read it out to you. But a 1976 realization of his idea would portray it like this. I've usually waited until after my description to pronounce my judgment, but straight up, I'm going to put this in immediate D tier. I technically wouldn't consider it ugly or boring in any tangible way, but there is just so much going on. It feels really crowded, and also the dimensions of it make it feel like it would be very awkward to put on a traditionally circular seal. It bears some general resemblances to Hopkinson's and Simitiere's work, as in that it is a shield supported by 2 figures on its side with some text above and below, but the specifics of it are very different. Like I said, there is so much going on, I don't even know where to begin. The shield still has American flag motifs, but it is split in half with a pillar going through, with a phoenix on top, with an eye of providence even further above that. Man, this is just a mess. And on top of that shield is a helmet, and perched on top of that helmet is a rooster. I so deeply feel tempted to just throw this in F tier, but I want to be mature and restrain myself for a moment. So supporting one side of the shield is a woman, representing the new country holding an American flag with a dove perch on top of the pole, and on the other side is a knight holding a lance with a flag of heritage attached to it. Printed above is the Latin phrase Virtus sola invicta, roughly meaning virtue alone is unconquered. Printed below is the Latin phrase Dio favente, roughly meaning with God's favor. I'm sticking with my verdict of D tier, but this design frustrates me so much, if you can't tell. So many of these things, if given their own room to breathe or permitted to be more dominant features, could have generally been so cool. But when you smash them all together like this, they kinda just all drown each other out. Take the Phoenix, for example. You probably would not even have noticed that unless I was there to point it out to you. Imagine if he let that dominate the seal in the same way that like the bald eagle dominates the United States seal today. There could genuinely have been a world where the phoenix was the preeminent symbol of my country, which as much as I love the bald eagle, that would have been symbolically and aesthetically awesome, and I'd have no complaints. It just seems like Barton had a lot of ideas, but wasn't willing to let any of them go. As I said, D tier. After his proposal, it was predictably deemed to be too complex, and after revising it, this artwork and its accompanying description was the result. It is only somewhat less crowded, and I'd say I guess I like it better, but it still invoked similar frustrations in me. Thus, it shall join its sibling in D tier. I need not speak on it in as much length. The knight switched to a soldier, Virtus sola invicta got moved to the bottom, with the top now reading In Vindicium Libertatis, loosely meaning in defense of liberty. The Eye of Providence is no longer present, but the most important change here is that the rooster has been replaced by an eagle. It isn't a bald eagle, just a more generic eagle, and furthermore it is holding a sword with a laurel wreath on one claw and an American flag on the other claw. As I said, the design is D tier, but many of the individual components had potential. Barton at this point may seem like he's deserving of some fraud allegations, but I would encourage you to be hesitant with that, because, well, Mr. Barton, welcome to S tier. Although for his first design he gave no reverse face, for his second one he did, and it became the foundation for the truly iconic design that we still use today. The Eye of Providence has been moved to this side, sitting atop a 13-stepped pyramid, probably taken from some of their contemporary currency. Deo favente has been moved here as well, and below everything is the simple Latin word perennis, meaning everlasting. It's simple, beautiful, striking, digestible, and just plainly great. I love it. S tier. This second submission, both the obverse and reverse, were shown before the Continental Congress on May 9th, which, to point out something that could go unnoticed, was literal days after he'd been contacted, which was likely on the 4th or 5th of that month. As much as I kinda ragged on what I consider a subpar design for his obverse, I would have loved to see what he would have revised his ideas down to if he was given more time. Besides that though, it doesn't really seem like it went anywhere regarding the Congress's approval. Probably as a virtue of Barton just doing so much, the third committee contributed a good amount to the final design that Americans know to this day. An eagle, albeit a more generic and less imposing one. And you know, the entire reverse design. Moving on from the end of that, on June 13th, 1782, apparently the Continental Congress re-emphasized that it was Charles Thompson's duty to just go ahead and figure this out, essentially making him a one-man committee. He can be thanked for the design that I know and appreciate today, as he would produce this rough sketch and an accompanying written description. The bald eagle is the dominant feature, holding the motto E pluribus unum in its beak, an olive branch in one claw, and a bundle of arrows in the other. On its chest is a shield decorated with motifs from the American flag, and there is a constellation of 13 stars overhead, surrounded by light and clouds. This I will happily put in S tier. He doesn't actually seem to have drawn the reverse, but in his writings he does make some alterations to Barton's design. He adds a proper triangle around the eye, he puts the founding date in the Roman numerals at the base of the pyramid, the Latin phrase now reads Annuit coepitis, meaning God has favored our undertakings, and Novus Order Seclorum, meaning a new order of the ages. On June 19, 1782, Barton would do a more heraldically precise and technical rewrite of Secretary Thompson's obverse design, and a 1903 rendition of it looks like this, although it is definitely a bit inaccurate to its specifications. It slightly alters the design of the shield, the positions of the eagle's arms and legs are altered, a weird stipulation is made allowing for a palm instead of an olive branch, and a count of 13 is specified for the stars and arrows, surrounding everything in an abbreviated Latin phrase which essentially just states that it's the Great Seal of the country, along with the nation's date of founding. For some reason I feel weird ranking this one, and I feel even weirder putting it in S tier, but I also see no reason not to put it there, if that makes sense. It would pretty quickly go back to Thompson, who himself would pretty immediately make a report and get it to the Continental Congress, which would be read aloud the next day on June 20th, 1782, of which the only change was removing that outer text and the omission of that bit about the palm branch. And at long last, after just over 6 years since the need for a Great Seal was brought up, the country had what it considered a fitting device, producing these designs. Thompson would carry out his duties of making a die for the obverse of the Great Seal, and it would first be used on September 16th of that same year. I will happily go ahead and put these in S tier. On a legal level, Thompson's final report to the Continental Congress is just a written document, hence why the Great Seal design has occasionally changed since its inauguration, but at the end of the day these are all interpretations of that same design, so I feel no need to rank these separately. Thus, the story of the origin of the United States Great Seal has come to an end. As I close out this video, recall my remark that I would come back to the story of Benjamin Franklin and his turkey. Essentially, it's a catchy story extrapolated from a few remarks that were actually made by the doctor. On January 26, 1784, around a year and a half after the official design had been confirmed by the Continental Congress, he would send this letter to his daughter Sarah. I'm not going to read it all out to you, but there are some key things to point out. His statements that the bald eagle of the Great Seal looked very much like a turkey, something I actually agree with him on, but furthermore that he wishes that the bald eagle hadn't even been chosen as a representative of his country. He attributes an immorality to the bird, and contrasts that with the turkey, which he seems to respect much more. Nowhere, however, does he suggest that the seal should be changed, probably in part due to the fact that he thinks it looks so much like a turkey. On top of that, he is at the same time referring to the eagle found on the emblem of the Society of the Cincinnati, but given that its design is so similar and in fact based on the American Great Seal, I imagine his sentiments would be transitive. In spite of those less captivating and probably half-joking statements from Franklin, people's imaginations have been captured by it. Some have come up with hypothetical designs of what a turkey would look like on my nation's Great Seal. The best I have found is this one, made by Anatol Kovarsky in 1962, which I will put in A tier. I think a turkey design does have the capacity for S tier, but this feels safer. If an offhand mention like that from Franklin is worthy of being ranked, then so is another one from him as well, as in 1775 under one of his pseudonyms, he, after having seen some version of the Gadsden flag, made what is in my opinion a pretty compelling discussion regarding the potential for the rattlesnake in being used for the coat of arms for their new nation, which consequently kinda makes it a bit of a shoe-in for the design of the Great Seal. He offers no design, he doesn't even bring up the idea of a Great Seal in the proper sense, but it is worthy of being mentioned. To represent what could have been a potential design, I'll use this illustration from some state currency that was used around that time. Regarding the idea as a whole, like the turkey idea, I'll put it in A tier, but similarly, I believe it also has the capacity for S tier. The final thing that I want to bring up for this video's rankings comes from one small and very obscure comment attributed to Thomas Jefferson in some of his private writings, and probably dates to around 1774. Here is the relevant statement. Quote, "A proper device, instead of arms, for the American States United would be the father presenting the bundle of rods to his sons, the motto, Insuperabilis si inseparabilis." End quote. This image comes from one of Aesop's fables, in which a father shows a bundle of sticks to his sons, asks them to break it, and when they all fail, he divides the sticks, asks each of the sons to break one of them, to which they succeed. Thus they are taught the lesson that together they are unbreakable, but separated they are breakable, or to translate Jefferson's Latin phrase, insuperable if inseparable, which in my opinion is actually just kind of a cool motto. But regardless of that, this would be an awful seal design. No seal design of it has ever been made to my knowledge, as this is a very obscure story, so I will represent on the tier list with this artwork. Despite my condemnation of it, there is something, really cute about it, if that's the right word, and it kind of appeals to me. And therefore, I will let Jefferson escape a F tier 3-peat, and let this one climb up to D tier. I almost want to give it C tier. There's something about it that is just so, weirdly charming, but I think I will restrain the impulse. You know what? This is the end of the video. I'm giving it C tier. Who cares? Thus, we have reached the end of our tier list, and I think the prehistory of the United States Great Seal has been sufficiently explained alongside it. With that said, I want to thank you for your time and attention. I hope that I was able to make it worth it. God bless, and goodbye. Okay, I am definitely going to try and not ramble at the end of this one, because it is 3:20 in the morning, and I have been standing for 2 hours, deadlocked, locked legs, standing still, in my closet. And I really just want to stop doing that. Besides that though, last week's video, or not last, it was 2 weeks ago, that went so incredibly well. I don't know if those people who watch that will reach this part of the video, or if they've even subscribed or any of that. But thank you for the performance of that. Truly, I feel blessed from that. So thanks be to God that I even had the opportunity to do that in the first place, and thanks to all of those people who chose to watch it. I hope that it was worth it, really. I feel blessed to have kind of stumbled across this video idea too. I'm super surprised that no American history YouTubers have covered this to my knowledge. I'm really surprised by that, but I hope I can do it justice, maybe. Who knows? Either way, I feel blessed for having stumbled upon it, so thanks be to God for that. Christ be with you all, and goodbye.